It is that time of the week. It's time for NHL Today here on SportsGrid TV. And as y'all know, we got a lot to get into, seeing as how there's so many games in the NHL. There's been so many great headlines, injury reports, and so much more. Not the great part of the injury reports, but the best way to dive into all of it, to go across the board, to puck across the league, is to case the league. Let's see what we got going on around casing the league. All right, we've got our detection hats on. We're going to get you guys up to date on everything that's taking place over the week. Starting on a bit of a scary note, though. We got Dylan Holloway, who had a very scary situation versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. A puck to the throat, and then he said that he knew immediately once the puck hit him in the throat that something was wrong. He doesn't even remember after getting hit, moving over to the bench. After the bench, he ended up on the stretcher going to the hospital immediately. They did have to open up his passageway to make sure that he could breathe accordingly, but the good news is the next day he was back at the facility. He was doing pressers. He was talking about the experience, and then he was back in the lineup just 2 days after the incident when he was on the ice versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's the first thing that we've got going on across the league. Look, hockey players are built different. Dylan Holloway is one of many hockey players that just continues to prove that on a game-by-game basis. Something else going on around the league. Last week, yes, it was a Friday ago, but Sasha Barkov shows homage to all of the great work that he does on the ice, and more so, he went off putting on a show in Finland. 5 points in the Global Series, but everything that he did in the Global Series, he had a donation for goals, he had a donation for assists, resulting in $4,800 in donations. I mean, grabbing a goal upon injury says one thing, but then to go to Finland and be the staple of your team, putting a beating on the Dallas Stars, they've been in the Stanley Cup conversation to make a return yet again, and they just continue to prove that point game by game. Currently, Barkov has 11 points in 6 games. Yes, you're hearing me correctly, just 6 short games, picking up where he left off last season, one of the best two-way centers in the league. And look, he's getting in that goal tally just a smidge more already thus far this season. Then moving along, we also do have Connor McDavid. We talked about him on NHL Today last week. Originally, when he accumulated that injury, he was supposed to be out for 2 to 3 weeks. Then, just after 10 short days, makes his bounce back to the ice to help out his Oilers team start piecing together some offense. Before the injury, he was sitting at 10 points in 10 games at a +3, 3-game winning goals, 2 overtime goals. Are we surprised by the statistics and the numbers? This is why he still sits at the top of the Hart conversation, including Hart odds. Someone else heading over to the Colorado Avalanche. We know that their injuries have just been accumulating one after the other, but that hasn't stopped them from having McKinnon and Makar go to work on behalf of this team. But they get back Arturi Lehkonen, returning from injury from the Avs. Now, upon his return, picks up a 2-point night for a 6-3 victory over the Seattle Kraken. And then last but not least, around the league, we've got Barry Trotz, who's sitting here dropping hints that if his veterans cannot get it together, then they're going to be starting that rebuild mode a lot sooner than anticipated. Something else I want to bring into perspective when it comes to Barry Trotz and the conversation around his veterans and the slow start the Nashville Predators have had is the fact that it's their young guys carrying their team. There was a really cool statistic out on Twitter about how the numbers are just not coming in for the veterans. You saw a press conference with Ryan O'Reilly where he just said that his performance was pathetic in one of these previous games. Obviously, there's ownership and accountability there, but there's just shock all around. My theory, though, I feel like the Predators, and I'm responsible for hopping on this wagon myself. I feel like there was a lot of vibes that said the Predators are going to be the new Misfits. They just had the blueprint to replicate what Vegas Golden Knights went through. But if we also consider what the Vegas Golden Knights went through when they tried to put together a more all-star roster at first, it just didn't pan out. And I'm not being biased, y'all. Sometimes you need those diamonds in the rough to support your main characters, and there's probably just too many main characters here. These veterans trying to find a rhythm and a cadence, it's just been tough. Steven Stamkos has stepped up when it comes to the scoring, but still, you're not seeing a guy like Marchessault, who was the absolute best with the Vegas Golden Knights. They have previous history together. Ryan O'Reilly has always been such a dominating force on the ice, so a lot of things are just not clicking. It's going to be interesting to see what happens and how they repurpose some contracts if they can't find more points heading throughout this season. Now, that is casing the league, but where there is not so good news, there's even better news, because it's time for us to talk about our 3 stars of the week. And one thing I can promise you here on SportsGrid is that we're not going to replicate what we see elsewhere. No, we don't have to pick the same 3 stars that everybody else thinks of. And that's the best part about it. Although 2 of my 3 stars, it's just a non-negotiable. What they've done, the performances they've had in this past week, you got to make them a star. So we're going to start with Alex Ovechkin, of course, because you've got 2 of the most iconic guys facing off on the ice tonight, but more importantly, it's just what he's done. 16 points in 12 games, sitting at a plus 10. And finally, he has a supporting system in the Capitals where they're not sitting in negatives when it comes to scoring. They're actually one of the top scoring teams, I think sitting at 4.18 last I checked for goals for. The chase to extend greatness is in full pursuit, because how poetic is it that he grabs goal 861 as a game-winning goal versus that Predators team we were just talking about. Now, sometimes the push to shove is there when you compete against the Predators, but regardless, it's the fact that the Capitals needed to piece together the entirety of their game. They weren't able to get points on the board. They were stuck in their own zone all the time. They were forced to defend for dear life and then rely on their goaltending, which stepped up tremendously. But regardless, they have now started to find a way to piece the game together, Ovechkin being a key piece in that. So of course he's a star of the week, and I'm excited to see what he does versus the Penguins tonight, which we will get into when I talk about my favorite plays of the day later on in NHL today. Then this is the sneaker for me. Kyle Palmieri. Why Kyle Palmieri? We know that the Islanders are struggling immensely right now. They're starting to string together more wins. But let's say this. They're one of the top teams for getting shots on goal and creating scoring chances. So it's not like the opportunities haven't been there. Do we hear that in a lot of press conferences with these players all the time? Yes. It feels like hockey script. But this is a hockey script that's actually not hyperbole. The chances have been there, and considering that their roster doesn't have much of an identity, Palmieri has been tremendous for this team. First of all, he put this team on his shoulders over the last couple of performances. Split his lip open, gassed from the nose all the way to the top lip versus the Rangers on Sunday. Cleans it up, goes back to that hockey players are different conversation. But then outside of that, played a huge role in the comeback win versus the Penguins. Now, is there a surprise there? No. Penguins let up the most odd man rushes in the league currently, but regardless, 11 points in 14 games, not sitting as far in the negative column as he previously has before. And this is a guy who has a 30-goal caliber, picked up 30 goals last year. So no matter where you put him, he's one of the few people that's helping to generate a consistent offense or opportunities, because we're not seeing that much scoring quite yet, but consistent generate chances for the Islanders. So I had to put him up there just because of the way he has shouldered the New York Islanders while they try to sort through what this roster is going to look like moving forward. And Martin H.S. What else can we say about the Hurricanes right now? One of the most explosive offenses in the NHL at the moment. 21 points in 12 games, you guys, and 3-game winning goals. It's impossible to keep this guy off of the score sheet, whether it's in the assist column or the goal column. And he's helped bring this offense to life. They were off to a bit of a sluggish start through their first 3 games. There's still some question marks around their defense, but they're just so hard to slow down, and they're so hard to keep off the board. And this is one of the leading men in that entire conversation. I do have to throw some honorary mentions out there. It's so hard to pick 3 stars in one of the fastest, most exciting games out there. Now, again, it's not always going to be the most popular person. It's not always going to be the most popular player, but Ryan Donato for the Blackhawks, he needs some love on his name right now. The Blackhawks have had some moments where they've actually stood up teams defensively, and it's been surprising. They've kept games much closer than anybody anticipated, and they've made things a bit more exciting. Do they let up some more goals in that third period? Sure, but it's the Blackhawks. They're technically still in a rebuild. But Donato has really found a form this season so far, and you're talking about a guy who has 10 points in 13 games, a 6-game winning goal, more importantly, versus the LA Kings, who shouldn't have bbeen so easy to top. Then Macklin Celebrini, the 2 lone goals last night to keep his team from being in a shutout, and plus the most disgusting, the most no-look goal last night going against the Minnesota Wild, a hard team to compete against. And I love when they mention on Twitter that he's one of the guys who has the youngest guy scoring on the oldest guy in the league. So you got to give some love to Celebrini. You got to give some love to Donato. And those are going to be my honorary mentions when it comes to the 3 stars of the week. But don't go anywhere. Stick with us here on NHL Today, because we've got one of my favorite line mates to come in and join the conversation. Dave Sherapin joins us on the other side of this break to talk about more things around the NHL. Then we've got favorite plays of the day to close out the show. Make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid. Make sure you're following Dave so that you can keep track of the conversation we're about to have, and make sure you join us back here on SportsGrid right after this quick break.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, Going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What can you say about Hunter? Besides the fact that he's got to be healthy. Remember, he had the shoulder injury that kind of limited him at, once he got to the end of the season. 17.9, 10.9 last year, and he should be, as usual, a double-double machine. He's got to be able to continue to show the ability to try and shoot the ball from three.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into NHL today. More importantly, it's time to face off with one of my favorites, Dave Sherpin. We're typically line mates, so face off just feels like it could be potentially aggressive, but we'll see where the conversation goes. But first and foremost, line mate, how you doing? How's your Friday going so far?
So far, so good. Listen, I get called up to talk hockey with you. I'm like, yeah, let's go. What am I going to wear? I looked through some stuff, and I looked through the games today, and I said, you know what? Sometimes you just got to wear the gear, even if you don't believe it. And, I mean, it's Ovechkin and Crosby today. It's Huddy and Sherapan today. I'm good with it. I'm good with it, Case. This is, star matchup. They should have put your picture and my picture in the middle of that star matchup. I would have taken that. These two have been doing it for how long, Case? This is one of those ones that I'm just like, man, we're a lot closer to the end than the beginning, but it's always fun when the Capitals and the Penguins match up.
I know, and one of the first weeks historically that both of these guys have been a star of the week at the same time. The goat-off tonight, not only between you and I, but between these two, will be fantastic. I believe that wholeheartedly. That brings me, obviously, to one of my first questions, talking with one of my favorites. We've got to navigate some things here because you've got a lot of bettors that were so heavy-handed with saying the Nashville Predators are going to the Stanley Cup, the Oilers are going to the Stanley Cup, the Avs are going to the Stanley Cup, and we've seen a lot of wild hockey, more importantly, slow starts, and a lot of stop and goes. I mean, you think the teams are finding a rhythm, and then all of a sudden there's a number of things playing into a lack of success on their end. So before we talk some Stanley Cup odds, let's talk about some angles here, because you've got some teams where you probably should look at them and say, hey, they're really good at hitting the over. They're really good at hitting the under. So let's start with the guys, or the teams, more importantly, that help you cover the over. Can we get the graphic up here, guys? And Sportsbook King, you got to let me know, how do you start gauging something like this moving forward? Because hockey is a tough sport sometimes to really just stay on top of, because it can go any which direction.
I love betting the totals in hockey because, you get a bad call or a power play late or something, and it can swing the decision. But the way the game is played, I think, and I've known this just from, being in the book for so many years, the guys that are really good at this play the totals. And you look at that over thing and you go, all right, is that because they're scoring or because they're giving them up? And on that list right there, it's a little bit of both. So you can find teams to play against through the totals, and you can find teams to play on through the totals. Now, the overs mean one thing, and I mean, obviously, the Avalanche, the Knights, and the Panthers are near the top of the list in teams to win the Stanley Cup. Now, look at the under list case, and you go, all right, who's shaping up here as a really good defensive team or an underperforming overall team? Like, why are the Ducks and the Sharks and the Flames on this list? So I think you start to look at things a little bit differently when you look at it through the lens of the gambling.
Yes, and that's such a good point. Some of those teams are very surprising in a sense. I mean, to see the Dallas Stars on there, then the defense that they previously, I mean, I know that they lost some key pieces, especially Chris Tanev, who's now with Toronto. That was a guy who just made a number of shutdown plays wholeheartedly by himself. And you lose a piece like that, and then some pucks start to get past the rest of the defense there and putting Ottinger to the test. But what's been the most surprising team in that best overs category? Because like you said, some of these teams have been in the Stanley Cup conversation. People threw their money on it at the beginning of the year wholeheartedly and confidently. You got the Colorado Avalanche, Vegas Golden Knights playing quite well, letting up some goals in the second period there, charging back in the third period. Florida Panthers just seem to be remaining in rare form. Columbus Blue Jackets are probably my biggest surprise this season. And then the New York Islanders, I mean, I don't really know where to start with them. So who's been your biggest surprise?
Well, when I saw this list and I sent it to the boys to put the graphic together, the two teams at the bottom of that list surprised me the most. I mean, Columbus, just with everything with Johnny Gaudreau, and just I don't even know how they started the season, and that was one of those like moments in time, that the opening game and everything that they did, and then you got to just go play, like you got to go take your shift and play hockey games. Them being on there, and then the Islanders were always historically, at least recent history, an under team, and they're on the over team list, so you kind of got to go, okay, why? Well, it's because they're giving up goals. So It's not because they're scoring them. They're giving them up. And those would be the two biggest surprises. The three at the top, fully expected it to be that way. I mean, Florida's power play, really good. Colorado at home, they just score goals. And then the Knights, they don't score goals early. They're like a go against in the first period a lot of times, but they score goals late, right? Like second, third period. You mentioned it earlier. I don't know what it is. They turn it on and just go.
That third period puck line comes in hot over and over and over again. I had third period puck line, Noah Hannafin shot on goal. Noah Hannafin picks up 2 goals in the third period. Talk about the third period push. Before we move on, let's talk about those teams that are really loading up on the money line success, though. We've got some of the best teams out there that are consistent. Winnipeg Jets, well, I mean, one of the hottest, most consistent starts. Who had that pegged on the board for this season? Washington Capitals, I talked about their off. Like, they didn't have to make too many moves. They needed to figure out how to score more because they were just stuck defending and just pinned in their zone all the time. Florida Panthers, St. Louis Blues, still can't figure out the Blues. I'm hit or miss on them. Defensively, goaltending, they tend to be there sometimes. And then the Carolina Hurricanes are a force to be reckoned with. So talk to me about these top teams.
Oh, there's 3 teams on that list that I think are near the top of the odds boards for like Stanley Cup stuff. And it's the Panthers and the Hurricanes in the East. It's the Jets in the West. Okay. Those ones there, you talk about being a big surprise. The Capitals are the biggest surprise on that list of moneyline teams doing well. They're winning games. You stack them up early. You know this in October, November, December, and we get to the new year. And now you can kind of have a plan to maybe make a move late and shore up things for a nice playoff run. Before the season, if you'd have asked a lot of people, are the Capitals going to make the playoffs? They would have said no. So
100%.
That's been the biggest surprise for me, and it's Ovechkin. He's still doing it, Kasey, and he's going to do it tonight.
He is going to do it tonight. Fingers crossed. But before I let you go, I got to ask you this. Hot seat. Do the Capitals have the potential of besting the New York Rangers in the Metro?
No. Relax. You know Shesterkin's going to hold things down. Come on, Case. I know you're new to town, but they're not going to do that.
All right. Maybe I put myself in the hot seat with that one. That's Dave Sheridan here on SportsGrid TV.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What can you say about Hunter? Besides the fact that he's got to be healthy. Remember, he had the shoulder injury that kind of limited him at, once he got to the end of the season. 17.9, 10.9 last year, and he should be, as usual, a double-double machine. He's got to be able to continue to show the ability to try and shoot the ball from three.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into NHL Today here on SportsGrid TV. More to get to, but most importantly, make sure you guys are following Dave Sherapan over on X as well as SportsGrid, because that information was so key, and it's going to guide us through more of the excitement of the NHL season. But you know what else is key? Some favorite plays of the day. You guys see me post it on social media. You see SportsGrid throw it out into the mix. We got a fun slate tonight. Like we said, Battle of the Goats going down, but let's get into some of these guys that I'm banking on. You got Match Petrichetti, 1+ point, plus 115. There's a lot of plus value on the books tonight, but just considering the level of compete going into this mix-up, I like to see these players that pull through and play strong versus specific teams. Petrichetti, 18 points in 24 games, 11 goals, and sitting at a plus 13. One of those key contributors to make sure the Capitals are not getting pinned in their own zone. Someone else, William Nylander. I was surprised to find 1+ assists at plus 100, but I understand why. In terms of the competition going down tonight, Nylander versus the Red Wings is typically the guy picking up a goal. While I can foresee that if the Lions remain Petrichetti, Nylander, then I can see him probably setting up Petrichetti to help get some points on the board. But then it's that top line that should be a lot faster tonight for the Toronto Maple Leafs going against a Red Wings team that doesn't have a problem scoring. So I like Nylander to be the setup guy in this mix. But look, when he's dishing it out, he's also finding the back of the net himself. So take Nylander for 1+ assists at plus 100. Lucas Raymond has been on fire as of late. He's one of my favorite guys last year. He's carrying that momentum into this season. Him for 1+ assists is sitting at plus 126. Lucas Raymond, 12 points in 11 games. 7 of those points are assist specific. On the season, he leads the Red Wings in the assist category as well. 11 assists through 12 games. P.S. Look at the coincidental numbers there. I mean, that feels like good luck for me as well as good luck for you to pick up a plus 126 on Lucas Raymond. Then Capitals first period puck line. This has been something that's been quite consistent for the Capitals so far this season. Capitals have been able to get out to fast starts, which has been very helpful. And we picked up a Capitals first period puck line just a few nights ago. So I'm a big fan of just sticking with what works. That's coming in at plus 136. Alex Ovechkin, you got a GOAT battle tonight on the ice. How do you not take him to pick up goal number 862? I love the vibes behind this, especially considering what the Capitals can do tonight in comparison. The Penguins, are the top team in the nation right now, in the league, letting up odd man rushes. Ovechkin has an opportunity with the guys playing alongside of him to be a part of one of those rushes to pick up a goal tonight. That's sitting at plus 115. Then Alexei Potras, 1+ point at plus 115. I like the Wild's third period puck line at plus 118. The Wild are one of those other teams, kind of like the Vegas Golden Knights, that have this consistent third period push. So that's just another thing. You keep working it until it stops working for you. Troy Terry, 1+ point. That's just kind of something to keep the Ducks in the matchup. Also, if the Ducks get power play opportunities, you can usually count on Terry to be one of those guys helping to be a contributor in that. Touching back on Poitras for a second, he's a 6'6 center who has 12 points in 12 games, 7 assists and 2 game-winning goals, and a strong freaking shot. Then Jack Eichel, 2+ points. That's coming in at plus value. Noah Hannafin, 1 shot on goal in the third period at -108. But before we close out, let's talk about our long shot lamplighters. The guys I got coming in hot. Sitting at the top, you've seen me post about him so much. It's going to be Matthew Knies plus 230 because Matthew Knies is potentially going to be sitting on the same line as the previous game that the Leafs were in. Max Domi bringing the speed, Mitch Marner helping out in the assist column, and Knies is just so good at finding those really, really, really dirty goals. Then you've got Dylan Strome, goal plus 230 here. Again, that's just kind of going with the theme that the Capitals will find success tonight on the ice, and Strome is one of their leaders in the points conversation. Matt Zuccarello, I love him for plus 280. He's one of the guys who's in that closer conversation with helping get the job done for the Minnesota Wild in those third periods. Then, I'm going to sit with this one for a minute. Ryan Hartman for the Minnesota Wild, plus 400. Hartman has 17 points in 24 meets versus the Ducks, but it's the 9 goals, the plus 11, the 1 shorthanded goal, the 3 game-winning goals, the 1 OT goal. Do you catch the theme here? Ryan Hartman can close out a game, and I'm counting on Ryan Hartman to be a closer in this game for the Minnesota Wild. And then the other night, I talked about the Vegas Golden Knights being one of those teams with the third period push. I talked about Noah Hannafin being a leader in that third period push. Oh, the guy picks up 2 goals in the third period. A lot of that momentum versus the Seattle Kraken, defensemen tend to kind of be the charge and the QB to find the back of the net for these matchups. So I like Noah Hannafin's flow right now. I like what he means to this team. I like his contribution in that third period, and I like him to pick up a long shot lamplight at plus 500 tonight. So make sure that you are following along with SportsGrid over at SportsGrid, and you know the deal. Write it in on your calendar. NHL Today is back every Friday at 2 p.m. running through the headlines, running through the injury report, keeping you up to date on the best players in the league, as well as the underdogs, because they need a lot more love. It's those bottom 6 guys that are going to help these guys get to the postseason and potentially a Stanley Cup. So make sure you stick with us on NHL Today every Friday at 2 o'clock. Make sure you follow myself at the Sports Case as well as at SportsGrid. And until next time, guys, everybody enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the hockey, and I'll see you back here next Friday at 2 p.m. on NHL Today.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take. I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
What can you say about Hunter? Besides the fact that he's got to be healthy. Remember, he had the shoulder injury that kind of limited him at, once he got to the end of the season. 17.9, 10.9 last year, and he should be, as usual, a double-double machine. He's got to be able to continue to show the ability to try and shoot the ball from 3.
Betting above the rim, only on